Well, hi there, I'm Noah Bradley, and this is Handmade House TV. On today's episode, we're going to talk about log cabins that are made out of round logs. What do I think of them? Do I recommend them? Stay tuned. Well, alright, on today's episode we're going to talk about log cabins that are made out of round logs, more commonly referred to in broad terms as pole cabins, where the logs are basically trees where most often the bark is removed and these round logs are put up as is in the log cabin. Now, if you've been following along with me, you know that I'm not a big fan of pole cabins, that I much prefer the traditional hewn type logs. And today a lot of the folks are sawing their logs flat on both faces and leaving the tops and the bottoms round and naturally contoured in order to avoid shaping the logs with an axe. And it is a labor-intensive action in order to use a broad axe in order to flatten the faces of a log, but in the long run, I'm a firm believer that the traditional method of building log cabins is by far the superior method of building log cabins. And if you've been following along, you know all my reasons behind that. But nonetheless, I get a lot of questions about well, what's your opinion of the round logs? We already know what issues you have with them, but what are your thoughts on it? That our society today is faced with a lot of round pole log cabins. So typically there are three different methods or styles of round logs. And one of them is basically the primitive pioneer cabin where the trees were taken down, cut the length, the bark was taken off, and then a notch was done in each corner of it. Today it's commonly done by those that practice bushcraft. Perhaps they won't take the bark off, but it is more or less a pioneering method of venturing into the woods and realizing that you need an immediate, fast shelter. And the pioneers of old were often faced in the same situation, where they would travel throughout the pleasant months to get to their location. Winter would arrive. They would need some kind of shelter in order to survive that first winter, and then the following spring they would need to concentrate on raising crops, so quite often they would put up a temporary structure that they would live in before they would build a nicer, traditionally hewn log cabin. And these structures were often lived in for a year or two, and then they were often used for the farm animals to live in, more or less a barn. And I've seen well over 1,000 traditional hewn log houses that are 150 to 400 years old in this country. But I've never seen a round pole log cabin over, say, 50 years old, and that's because they just didn't hold up. They just rotted away. We learn best what works best by observing what lasts the longest, what's the most durable and what's the most attractive. And so there is that form of it. And then there is the Scandinavian method, sometimes referred to as the Scandinavian scribe fit, where the round poles were not only notched in the corners, but also one log was notched in order to fit securely with a log below that. The Scandinavians were the originators of log home living. They've been doing it for centuries, longer than the United States has been in existence. And this was the method that they used in that colder climate, in a climate where there was little rain and lots of snow. And also their architectural details generally used a large roof overhang to protect the logs from any rain or moisture that would come down. So this technique provided, if they had straight logs in the northern climate, it gave them a fine, comfortable home, one that would last for a long time, thanks to these wide eaves that were traditionally on the house, sometimes I've seen them up to 4 to 6 feet long beyond the dimensions of the house, whereas typically on a home here in America, it's generally 10 to 12 inches is a typical overhang here. And so I get a lot of individuals that are building in the extreme northern climates, such as Scandinavia or Alaska or Canada, or the extreme Pacific Northwest part of the United States, in these climates where this architecture is the proven norm, where it's still being practiced, where it's still being carried out. And what is my recommendation as far as the traditional hewn method being used up there? First of all, I think the traditional hewn method here in the United States is incredible. It's wonderful. It's the best of the European, of the England and France and Germany coming together with the Scandinavian craftsmanship and creating an ideal log cabin, the perfect one for the temperature zones of most of the world. But my opinion is that if you're going to build a round log cabin, and I think that that's just fine. I think it's great if you're building it in those extreme northern climates, and that's what's traditionally done. That's known as vernacular building, when you build a house that is appropriate to the area that you are living in. And I think that the craftsmanship that goes into Scandinavian scribe fit homes is phenomenal. I tip the hat to all of the craftsmen who generate these type of log homes, where one log is custom fitted to the next one. It's not appropriate for most of the continental United States or in areas similar to that around the world. And then there is a third form of round pole construction, and it's basically, I think some people refer to it as the butt and pass method. And this method is where notching is no longer done in the corners. It's presented as notching is something that normal people are incapable of doing, which is not the truth at all. Notching, is my opinion, is the most important feature of any log cabin, visually and functionally. And in order to get around this, the logs are basically all sized the same, and then large spikes are driven in from the top in order to secure them all. Of the 3 different types of pole construction, that is by far the worst form of log construction there is. And in my opinion, I don't think it's acceptable form of construction in any place in the world for any reason. That it's always comes in last place. So to summarize today's, I'm a big fan of traditional. I still think it's the best. It's proven to be the best. But you will never hear me insult the Scandinavian scribe technique. And and I'm not an authority on that. I've never done it because it's not appropriate for my area. But if you're in that area, please don't feel like I am judging you for building that type. It's a great way to build. Anyway, that wraps it up for today. I would like to thank a few new members of the Handmade House Guild. They are Richard Nuttall, Michael Rodkicki, Chris Laughter, Matthew Dothit, Rick and Sue Menser, Robert Wallace, Johan Rosen, Klaus Henriksen. Sorry about that, Klaus. Reggie Watson, and Whitney Robinson. Wow, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 new members of the Handmade House Guild. We are growing. We are a great community. Our private online forum is getting more activity all of the time. Folks are enjoying the new Stonemason Academy as well as the Lakeside series, and I hope to give you more update on my Lakeside home the challenges that I'm having there in our next episode. So until then, you guys take care. Consider joining us in the guild, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye now.